George Herman Ruth Jr. was a baseball player who changed the game. He was big in the 1920s. He had a 22-season career from 1914 to 1935. Babe Ruth, who was also nicknamed the Bambino, started his MLB career as a pitcher who was left-handed for the Red Sox, but his really claim to fame was an outfielder for the New York Yankees. Babe Ruth is among the talks of the greats of all sports, along with people such as Joe Montana, Michael Jordan, legendary players who will not be forgotten for years to come. Although the 20s in America were known as the Roaring 20s, and sports were a big thing, football was getting its start, but it was more of a modest start. It wasn't too huge. Because of the lack of funding, because of NFL teams being started in smaller cities, it was not so roaring yet, but it was the start of something big.
Moonshine runners were very important to the start of organized racing groups, as well as keeping alcohol fed throughout the country, but it was illegal. The racing aspect of this was people making their cars faster, stay away from the cops, and then eventually starting to race each other on dirt tracks and beaches. Daytona Beach. This is where NASCAR truly got its roots started. Mainly with the moonshine runners. After they were done with their loads, they would start racing on Daytona Beach. And then that sprung into NASCAR starting to sponsor drivers and beginning of the NASCAR. As you can see here, this is likely one of the earlier forms of dirt racing. They're on a dirt track just like they would have been in the moonshine runners on Daytona Beach. But you can see there's no roll cage, very skinny tires with likely wooden spokes, and just very sketchy rides. As you can see here, this dirt car was built in the 80s and is much different from what would have been used by the moonshine runners and the early dirt racing cars, as it was actually have a roll cage and it had more horsepower and suspension to it. As you can see here, this dirt car is much different from the previous two I showed you. There's much more technology involved with this car, including safety and stagger and many other things just to make it go faster around the track. Racing has kept up with the times, just like all the other technologies that we have today.
Stock car racing, later known as NASCAR. NASCAR wasn't funded until February of 1948. Stock car racing developed during Prohibition and began to spread. Stock cars were modified to help alcohol producers outrun law enforcement. Lots of modifications were done to the cars, but the term stock car was used because the cars needed to look stock from the outside. Bootleggers would brag about their highest speeds, and others would claim that they were faster. Thus, stock car racing was born. Lots of car mods were invented/tested during this time, such as cold air intakes, larger carburetor jets, crankshaft weights, higher octane fuel, and many more. The theory of a turbo also originated in 1923. Horse racing. Horse racing had been around for 50 years prior to 1920, but it became extremely popular in this time period. People had just started genetically modifying horses around this time, creating, quote, wonder horses, as they were called. The automobile allowed people from around the country to come see horse racing. Along with this, betting was also extremely popular. This is what made horse racing the number one thing to do in the 20s. Boxing. Boxing was mainly dominated by Jack Dempsey, as talked about earlier. Fights were one of the most visited sports, second to horse racing. Jack was a large reason for this because people wanted to see him dominate his opponents, or some wanted to see him lose. Overview of the golden age of sports. Lots of sports really took off during the 20s. There was no TV or anything, so people went to sporting events as entertainment, resulting in large sports popularity, thus making it the golden age of competition.
Moonshiners, as they were called, needed a way to transport their illegal whiskey from the mountains to the customers in more populated towns and cities. One of the first to deliver a solution to the moonshiners' problem was Raymond Parks. In his day, Raymond controlled most of the whiskey transportation in the Atlanta, Georgia area. Raymond's drivers were good, and his cars were fast. So fast, in fact, that he entered them into the early stock car races, and they won a lot.
Time he was 16, he had 2 T-models hauling liquor to Atlanta. He told me he's paying 90 cents a gallon here in Dawsonville and getting $1.20 in Atlanta.
The money was too big of a reward. $200 Raymond brought home when he was 16 a week versus $20 working a job.
By the time he was 18, he owned a service station, and I always heard time he was 21, he was a millionaire.
And the key to Raymond Parks' success was being fast enough to stay ahead of the law.
And some of these boys ran as many as 3 loads of whiskey a day out of this town.
Sometimes you felt like it was a game. It was us against them. I knew they were going to make liquor, and I knew I was going to go spend the rest of the day trying to figure out where they were going to make liquor and how to catch them. It was a lot more liquor being made than it was liquor being caught.
I worked on the moonshiners' cars, and I kept them up, and I also worked on the alcohol and tax guys' cars, too. I never had one of them, the guys that the cars we worked on to get caught. We put the engine and all in the alcohol and tax guys' cars, but they wasn't quite as good as the ones we put in the liquor cars, you know.
Hey, Velocity fans, if you like what you saw, please subscribe to see more great videos.